Phoenix recorded 113 consecutive days above 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer of 2024. That broke the previous record by more than a month. The summer before, 645 people died from heat in one Arizona county. More than half of all heat-related deaths in the entire United States that year. 136 of them died indoors, in homes with air conditioning units present. Units that were turned off because the residents could not afford to run them. People dying of heat inside their own homes. Not because the technology to survive wasn't there, because they couldn't pay the electric bill. The water crisis in the American West gets the headlines. But there is an argument, and the data supports it, that heat will make parts of the Sun Belt functionally uninhabitable before the water runs out. Not because temperatures will cross some theoretical limit, because the systems that keep people alive in that heat are already failing. This is that story. In July 2023, Phoenix went 15 consecutive days without the temperature dropping below 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Not at midnight, not at 4 in the morning. The overnight low on July 19th was 97 degrees, the highest minimum temperature ever recorded in the city. A study published in April 2026 revisited that heat wave alongside 5 other major global events since 2000. The conclusion was stark. Conditions in Phoenix in 2023 produced periods classified as unsurvivable for older adults without cooling, without even reaching the wet bulb temperature threshold previously assumed to be the ceiling of human tolerance. The theoretical limit was wrong, not because the science was bad, because the models assumed access to shade, hydration, and rest that simply did not exist for the people who died. This matters because almost every projection about when Sun Belt cities become dangerous relies on thresholds, hit this temperature, cross this humidity level, and then the crisis begins. But the crisis does not wait for thresholds. It is already happening inside the gap between what models assume and what actual people's lives look like. Maricopa County has tracked heat deaths since 2006 with unusual precision. The patterns are clear. Over half of all deaths in 2024 occurred on days of moderate heat risk, not record-breaking days. Moderate ones, the danger is not concentrated in the days that generate emergency alerts. It is spread across an entire summer of accumulated heat exposure grinding down the most vulnerable residents. In homes without functioning air conditioning, on streets without shade, in a city where the urban heat island effect adds 5 degrees above what the surrounding desert registers. Phoenix is not the hottest Sun Belt city by humidity-adjusted standards, it is just the most studied. In Houston, Gulf Coast humidity means sweating stops working as a cooling mechanism well before the thermometer hits its peak. In Miami, nights that once cooled to the low 70s now regularly stay above 80. In Dallas, a heat wave that would have been exceptional in 2000 is now a routine July. 602 people died of heat in one Arizona county in the summer of 2024. That was considered an improvement. 300 million Americans could face power outages between 2024 and 2028, according to the North American Electric Reliability Corporation. Not brief flickers, extended outages during conditions where losing power is not an inconvenience. It is a medical emergency. The electrical grid serving the Sun Belt was designed for a demand profile that was essentially flat for 20 years. That profile no longer exists. Two things happen simultaneously that the grid was not built to absorb. First, rising temperatures drove air conditioning demand to levels that strained transformers and transmission lines in ways engineers never modeled. Second, the AI boom created an entirely new category of power consumer: data centers running at full capacity 24 hours a day, every day, regardless of season. ERCOT, the grid operator for most of Texas, projects peak demand could reach 367,000 megawatts by 2032. The current record peak is 85,000 megawatts. Projected demand in 7 years is more than 4 times the highest ever recorded. The primary driver is data centers. Houston showed exactly what grid failure during a heat event looks like. In July 2024, Hurricane Beryl knocked out power to more than 2 million Texans. 15 people died. Indoor temperatures climbed in homes not insulated for Houston summers. The outage lasted days. Damages reached $1.3 billion. Climate Central's research projects that a concurrent heat wave and blackout in Phoenix could put 1 million residents at immediate risk. with more than 50% of the city's population requiring medical care. Events like that could more than double heat mortality rates in a single summer. From 2018 to 2020, 62% of lengthy power outages in the United States overlapped with extreme weather. The overlap between grid stress and dangerous outdoor conditions is not rare. It is the dominant pattern. Between 2014 and 2021, average rent in Phoenix increased 60%. Median income increased 23%. That gap is where people make impossible choices. When housing costs consume most of a fixed income, the air conditioning bill becomes negotiable in a way it was never meant to be. People set thermostats to 85 degrees to save money. They turn units off at night and sleep in apartments that never drop below 90. A public health researcher looking at the data afterward can trace those decisions directly to a death certificate. In the moment, it felt like the only option available. The people dying of heat in Phoenix are not dying because they lack cooling technology. They are dying because the economic conditions of the city made using the technology impossible. That distinction changes what the solution looks like. If heat mortality were purely technological, more cooling centers and better equipment would solve it. Phoenix has invested in both, and the slight decrease in deaths in 2024 proves that coordinated response works at the margins. But heat mortality is also an economic problem. Growth that drives up housing costs drives up the population of people who cannot afford to survive the heat that growth generates. Now add the data centers. They bring billions in investment and thousands of jobs. They also consume millions of gallons of water, megawatts of electricity that strain an already pressured grid and generate physical heat that adds to the urban heat island effect. The cities competing hardest to attract them are the same cities already struggling with heat mortality, housing unaffordability, and grid reliability. The economic logic of attracting investment is colliding with the physical logic of what happens when you concentrate heat-generating infrastructure in an environment already at the edge of what is livable. Migration data for 2025 shows Phoenix, Houston, and Dallas still growing. The heat has not yet reversed the patterns that defined the Sun Belt for 40 years. But researchers tracking relocation decisions are beginning to document heat as a factor in where people choose not to go, particularly older adults, who are both the most vulnerable to heat mortality and the most mobile in retirement. A retiree choosing between Scottsdale and Asheville is making a calculation that now includes summer temperatures in a way it did not 20 years ago. The reversal has not happened yet. The conditions that would produce it are already in place. Air conditioning made the Sun Belt possible. The entire growth story of Phoenix, Houston, Dallas, and Miami rests on the assumption that technology solved the heat problem permanently. That assumption was always conditional: affordable electricity, a reliable grid, housing costs that left room in the budget for the energy bill, temperatures within the range the equipment was designed to handle. Those conditions are eroding, consistently, measurably, in data that anyone who looks for it can find. Miami is building seawalls against rising seas, while overnight temperatures strain the grid that powers the air conditioning, keeping residents alive. Houston is rebuilding electrical infrastructure after Beryl, while its legislature debates policies that experts say would make the next Beryl more dangerous. Phoenix is opening cooling centers while approving data centers that make the grid harder to keep stable. Every one of these cities is doing something. None of them is doing enough. And the gap between what is being done and what the trajectory requires does not close gradually. It closes suddenly, during a heat wave that lasts for days longer than the grid can handle, during a hurricane that knocks out power to 2 million people in July, during a summer when overnight lows stop dropping below 90 degrees for 3 weeks straight. The Sun Belt is not becoming uninhabitable tomorrow. But who can afford to live there? What it costs to stay cool? How many people die each summer? Those answers are being determined right now by decisions about grid investment, housing policy, and data center approvals that are being made with almost no public discussion of what is actually at stake. If you live in a Sun Belt city right now, has the heat already changed something about how you live? Not theoretically, right now. Do you go outside less? Has your electric bill crossed a number that surprised you? Have you had a conversation with someone about whether to stay? And if you don't live there, would you move there? Would you retire there? Those decisions, made by millions of people over the next decade, will tell us something the climate models cannot. They will tell us at what point the heat becomes a real reason that changes where people choose to build their lives. Drop your answer below.